sometime in the next few decades, humans will leave this planet to live in another world.
That means that some people in our life can be the first Martians. How about that?
We're finding out a lot about how to explore Mars in our station. Over 1,000 people from over 40 countries have actually participated in one crew or another.
It's the grandest adventure I could possibly imagine. That is, for me, the most important reason why we should pursue the establishment of life on Mars.
If we go to Mars in our time, 200 years from now, there'll be new branches of human civilization on Mars.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Red Planet Live. This is episode 10, and with me today we're going to be speaking with an amazing guest, Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich, and I will bring her on in just a sec. So what I want to kind of, just to start off the show first, I wanted to kind of make mention to our upcoming Mars Society Convention. So we actually have our 25th annual International Mars Society Convention that is going to be coming up shortly. So it's actually going to be quarter century, so we're celebrating. So it's amazing. So the actual convention runs from October 20 to 23rd, which is a Thursday to Sunday. So hopefully everybody can make it. And it's going to be at the Arizona State University, so ASU in Tempe, Arizona. And one thing that's really exciting, it's our first in-person conference in 2 years. We know the last 2 years have been challenging, so we're actually very excited that we actually are able to host the conference again in person. So we have an amazing lineup of key scientists, engineers, aerospace representatives, government officials, and space journalists talking about human Mars exploration and general space news. And one thing to mention too is that for those who are unable to attend in person, we also have the option to join virtually. So we actually we can do both, right? In person and virtual. And it's going to be similar virtual tools that we used in the past two conventions, which allows us remote attendees to watch the sessions, ask questions of the speakers in real time, and network with other attendees and a lot of new and exciting ways. So you can register online for tickets at marssociety.org. And of course, continue to check the site for any updates, major updates about new speakers, and of course, the program itinerary that may change. So thank you for that, for letting me mention that. And I just want to kind of jump right in. So awesome. So my next guest, actually, that I'll bring on here shortly, I just want to introduce her. So Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich is an astrobiologist at the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center in Israel. Her topics of research include extremophile adaptations, algae and bacteria bioreactors, and cross-contamination challenges in future planetary exploration. Reut was a participant in NASA's Spaceward-bound field expedition in South Australia in 2009, where she met Shannon Rupert, Chris McKay, Jennifer Heldman, and Penelope Boston. Reut is a former International Space University core lecturer for the Space Studies program on astrobiology. Reut is the co-founder and current chairperson of the Israeli Mars Society and former director of the New South Wales chapter of the Mars Society Australia from 2009 to 2013. She was chief scientist and co-founder of DMars, which is the NGO Desert Mars Analog Raman Station, from 2017 to 2020, and analog astronaut DMars 01. Reut has managed the Young Astronaut Academy program in Israel for 4 years, in which they train young junior high school students to be analog astronauts in the Israeli desert. Most of Reut's educational and scientific work was and still is supported by the Israeli Space Agency. And Reut also attests that she shall be the first Israeli female astronaut. So just if you put your hands together and welcome Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich.
Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm good. How are you? Very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to have you here. It's going to be amazing. And so I just want to kind of jump right in because I want to kind of bring attention to kind of where you are. So you're actually at an amazing conference right now. So I wonder if you mind to actually tell a little bit about where you are
Right.
And what's going on and what your part is there.
So basically, I was invited to be a speaker on a panel here on sustainability and how can we help anything that challenges that we have with climate change, and how analog missions can help us utilize different resources, methodologies, things that can help us with sustainability. And this is an amazing conference. It's the second time that it happens, but it's the first physical, non-virtual conference of the Analog Astronaut Conference. And it's happening at Biosphere 2 in Arizona, next to Tucson. And I'm super excited to be here because Biosphere 2 is for people from, whether if you like science fiction and whether you're an environmental scientist like me, I'm a microbiologist basically, and whether you're into analog mission and space simulation, we have learned a lot from the Biosphere 2, and it's an amazing facility. I always wanted to visit it, and I've not been disappointed, not by the conference and not by the building. The content is absolutely mind-blowing. So it's been great. 3 days that were absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and of course you traveled quite some ways to get there. So I mean, how long of a flight was it to actually get there?
It was, yeah, altogether more than 24 hours with a bit of a hop on via Europe, and then landing somewhere around here.
That's okay. I'm sure it was completely well worth all the struggles of the air travel and everything that goes, especially with all the extra checks that they put in place today. But that's okay. It's all worth it.
All part of the job. It's fine.
Yeah, a bit. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to mention to the audience today, so if you have any questions for Reut, please feel free to put them in the comments, and we will do our best to answer those live in the show today. So yeah, feel free to put them in. And of course, I see some amazing side conversations going on already. And so yeah, just keep that going. So what I wanted to, so I thought maybe to kind of jump into a couple of the topics as well. And I do have some of my some questions that I'd like to ask you as well, which is amazing. So I kind of want to, one question I do want to talk about is kind of what's going on in astrobiology today. So I have to admit, I will be upfront. It's an area that I'm not as well versed in. So I'm absolutely going to be leaning on you to educate me, and of course everybody else, to kind of go into astrobiology. What is the hottest topic that's going on? Not to put you on, actually, I'm putting you on the spot.
So actually, I'm just going to be a bit of a teaser because there's so many things happening in astrobiology. For me to say what is the most hottest thing happening right now, it's like, no, I can't really say that. But basically, astrobiology is a multidisciplinary science. So you have different topics that all combine this wonderful, wonderful science, which is called astrobiology. So some of the topics include, for instance, the beginning of life on planet Earth, how life evolved on planet Earth, what are the habitable conditions for it. That's where extremophiles come in, if we can find life under extreme conditions. Extreme conditions, by the way, relative to humans, right? Not necessarily relative to other things. How can we find them in different places? What are the methodologies? Where should we look for? We look at stuff that about like original chemistry of the universe, for instance, is super important for us to understand what kind of mechanism are behind the beginning of life, whether it's just, what was the first DNA molecule, what was the first RNA or protein or membrane, what was the transition between a single cell to a multicellular creature. That's part of the things that we do with astrobiology. We do a lot of, also part of the science is to find, for instance, solutions from extremophiles that you can employ as biotechnological application, whether it's cold adapted enzymes for different things, or you could get, like, for instance, Taq polymerase, which is a major enzyme we use today in molecular biology, basically came from Thermus aquaticus, which is a bacteria that was found in Yellowstone and lives around, 90 degrees Celsius and is really, really happy around there. If you put it under 70 degrees, they sort of degrade. So we know today that there's a lot of life out there on planet Earth that is actually usually microorganism that is very, very happy under extreme conditions. And these extreme conditions can be, for instance, high pressure. We're talking 400 bars, for instance, or atmospheric pressures. We're talking about high salinity, low salinity, high temperatures, low temperature. We find sometimes things that live in volcanoes. Sometimes it's a big world out there. And we use this knowledge in order to improve our methodologies and our ways to look where we can find life elsewhere in the universe, and also what are the proper methodologies that we want to employ. So, for instance, and I use space simulation missions that cost a lot less and are de-risking a lot of things in order to check these type of methodologies. So for instance, we're worried about forward and backward contamination. Let's say, for instance, that we land on Mars and we land in an area which might had or still has dormant life forms, for instance. Permafrost can harbor a few things. The ice caps, perhaps caves, are very really good habitats to look for life, whether they're present or past. And you want to have a proper methodology to monitor if your human interaction in that area, does it affect the composition of the microbial communities or whatever life forms is there. So you want to look at forward contamination, you want to look at backward contamination. And if you're on Mars and it's a human crew, then your human crew would actually cause forward contamination to the planet Mars, and then planet Mars might interact. We don't think that will happen. I think it's a low possibility at the moment, but basically that you might have backwards compatibility from the soils, from the water, from the caves, from the who knows what, that will come back into your habitat. And that you really need to pay attention to your methodology, how you advance in the land, how you do the sampling, where do you do the sampling, how often. So it's sort of like to monitor your time and space grid once you're in a certain pristine environment. So we had, via the DMars, DMars 03 was the mission that I had people on it, and they did an excellent job sampling it, and we were able to publish the results in 2021 about this, space and time monitoring during an analog mission. It was great. And we also found out that there's, of course, so it's one thing to assume things, and in science, then you have to show the data for it, so your assumptions are correct. So my assumptions were that basically closer to the habitat, you will have more disruption in the soil, in the genuine endemic soil composition, because of human interaction would be closer to the habitat than it will be someplace else. And that indeed was proved correct. We had much more I would say, human interacted bacteria introduced into the soil closer to the habitat than we had further away. And further away was just 280 meters in a sort of like a sterile, non-contaminated area that we knew that no one walked there before the mission, after the mission, and during the mission. And we saw a completely different bacterial composition and communities happening there. And what's happening is that once you know what your bacteria are and what your microorganism, whether it's fungi and viruses and things, you can come and say, okay, is this a threat, a possible threat to the crew? Yeah. Is this, what type of interruption is it to the functions of the bacteria in the soil? Because, for instance, my PhD was about nitrogen fixation. So a lot of soil bacteria, not a lot of, about a third, they do something which is super important, which is called nitrogen fixation. I have no clue what's happening on Mars at the moment. I don't think there is bacteria that's doing nitrogen fixation because we didn't see any data that would support it. But basically, if you had a human coming to a place where this process is happening and it interrupts the soil and interrupts the microorganism, that might have a lot of impact. On Mars, for instance, we have this puzzle about methane, right? We had a few evidence that there's methane at parts per billion concentration happening, and it's coming and going, and nobody's absolutely 100% certain whether it's abiotic, like if it's a physical process that happens in a repeated fashion, or whether that's a clue. Because on planet Earth, everything is life connected. All our geochemical cycles, whether it's sulfur, it's nitrogen, it's carbon, everything somewhere around along the way, methane as well, is connected to bacteria. We are a planet full of life. So for instance, if a crew would come to that area and for some reason would disrupt the only bacteria that does methane, that knows how to produce methane, methanogens. So that would be a bit of a cry. But if you employ the right methodologies from the beginning, it's not, I don't want people to avoid doing research. I don't like that attitude. I say, we do need to do the research. Let's just be like really smart about it and monitor what we're doing, and then have a proper, I would say, like a risk management system saying, okay, we know what's happening now, what might happen, and how we can avoid or circumvent it and still get the data. It's super important for us to find life elsewhere, and it's super important for us to know that the data integrity of the data is valid and has not been compromised. So controls are important, reference points are important, and also, a very skilled eyes and skilled people and knowledge base how to do these things. So astrobiology is many things. I wouldn't say there's one hot topic about it right now. But basically what's happening on Europa and is very interesting to people. And James Webb's supposed to start working, and James Webb actually has the capability to look also into our own solar system, not only far, far away. So I think we're going to get a lot of interesting new data that's going to blow our minds away. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. One thing we talked about extremophiles. Now, there's always been, over many years, there's been a lot of talk about these great little creatures called tardigrades. And would you consider them to be extremophiles? And why is there so much research being done actually regarding them?
So tardigrades are not extremophiles. There's more than, I think last time I checked, more than 1,000 different species within the tardigrade class or genus, more than 1,000 species. And you can find them in many normal environments, not only extreme environments, which means they're not extremophiles. You can find them, on leaves and in deserts, and in a lot of ecosystem use them because they are very good, like interconnectors in the food web. But the reason is that some people have found that once you dry them out, and they have been known to science for at least, I would say, 200, 300 years. The name tardigrade, there was an Italian researcher and there was a German researcher. The German researcher called them a kleine Wasserbär, which means a small teddy bear, because they do look like small teddy bears. And the tardigrade was the Italian researcher because he goes like, slow walkers. They're very slow, something like that. So the Italian one, and everybody's going with the tardigrade name. But what people have found out is that they seem to survive a lot of extreme situations. So they seem to survive complete long, I would say, dormant in hibernation. When they dry out completely, they have been flown to space and exposed to vacuum and exposed to gamma radiation, which is a radioactive radiation. And they seem to bounce back out of every situation that they have been. And we have found them in extreme environments as well, in Antarctica and other places. So their genome was completely sequenced as well, and they're fascinating creatures, but they seem to be a multicellular microscopic thing that you can actually find anywhere with a normal microscope. They're 0.5 millimeter to 1.5 millimeter from a length. So you don't need really a strong microscope to find them. And it's a great outdoor activity for kids. Go find me, a bark of wood, let's check if there's a tardigrade there. And you always find lots of other stuff anyhow. So tardigrades are pretty fascinating as model animals. They're multicellular, which is extremely weird and interesting for us. We know a lot of bacteria, which are one cell, unicellular, that are able to withstand a lot of problems. But with tardigrades, it's an awesome thing. It's multicellular. They have limbs. They have a very primitive digestive system. They're complex, and they're still able to survive these different conditions. Today, we know that they have an amazing mechanism for repairing their DNA, for instance. And they also, if I'm not mistaken, and also they have a way in which they completely expel all the water molecules and they dry out. Now, the thing about that is nobody is quite sure how you dry yourself completely out, because we are water-based creatures completely. Everybody on planet Earth is water-based, proteins. The structure of each protein and enzyme in your body is basically held at some point. It attaches itself to water molecules, literally H2O. So it's a very, very big thing for our biology. And nobody entirely at the moment understands how you completely dry out every H2O from your body, which is what tardigrades do. And then the minute you rehydrate them, they come back, they function, they produce healthy offsprings, which is a good standard to see if sometimes how your DNA was damaged. For instance, if you have healthy offsprings, then your DNA apparently is fine, and so on and so forth. So nobody is exactly sure how that puzzle is solved, but it's a very interesting puzzle, and they're being researched quite a lot. So tardigrades are awesome.
yeah, they're pretty
very
cool.
Cute. Very cute. Relatable.
But I think I guess I was kind of going too far down the ladder too, because I think that, so when you're talking about extremophiles, you're probably more talking about single cell organisms or much simpler organisms than in terms of what we're looking for.
Yes, I'm looking for bacteria and archaea, which are a different section in the evolutionary tree, but they're all unicellular basically, and they have amazing mechanisms to cope with extremities. So for instance, in salinity, so what you find is that So what's the problem? So first you have to understand the physics, right? So what's the problem with high salinity? So, okay, high salts, what's the problem? So the problem with salinity, with high salinity, is that you get a lot of ions. And what you get, when you get a lot of ions, you basically disrupt how your proteins work, because your proteins are basically also do a lot of not electrical, but they do a lot of binding to other molecules based on how they interact with their different ions and how many atoms they take and they give. And it's an interaction which is on a molecular level, at an atomic level, requires a lot of electron exchange. And once you have high salinity, you get ions, you get all these protons, you get a lot of electrons interrupting your system. So what we see, for instance, in extremophile, which are adapted to these type of saline environments, whether it's the Dead Sea or salt areas, is that we find several mechanisms involved in one microorganism in order to cope with this situation. So one of the things that they do is that they make sure that they have a lot of, they have osmoregulation, which is really good. So basically they make sure that they have as much water in and as much ions out, and they have several mechanisms to make that happen. And the next thing that they have is that they build their proteins in a way that the outer shell of a protein binds all these ions if they find them, but the inner side of the protein is protected and can work on everything that they need. So that's a very nice mechanism, and you see all these changes in their DNA and their enzyme and how they are able to cope with this situation. So the same thing, changes in proteins and type of amino acid that you use, we find also, for instance, in thermophilic bacteria and other extremophiles. Cool.
Another question I had, now I don't want to I don't want to go too far down the philosophical kind of avenue, but in terms of, the quest for finding life in the universe, in terms of finding it, of course, we're looking at our own solar system because it's a little bit closer than looking elsewhere. But in terms of, from your perspective, what is, this search for life to say, well, it can exist in other locations, not just in maybe a planet, it could be an asteroid, it could be anywhere else, but finding signs of life in other locations. What do you feel is, why are we so driven to really find those sources of life?
We're really interested in searching for signs of life because that's how we evolved on this planet. We're part of a planet that is full of living things. We are a living thing. We're connected to living things. Our survival is dependent on living things. So basically, that's why we have eyes, we have our senses, our smell. Everything that we are is about finding life elsewhere, whether it's in your closer environment or a distant environment, doesn't really matter. Your whole setup as a human being is to go and find life. And then you have to, decide whether it's hostile, it's problematic, can you use it, medicinal plants versus toxic plants and all that stuff. It's the same thing over and over. There's nothing special about for us looking life elsewhere in the universe. It's just the same thing that we're doing on the planet, and we're really good at it, in my opinion.
No, that makes sense to me. It's, this whole quest, right? Are we alone in the universe? And not necessarily looking for, other, intelligent life or, spacefaring civilizations. Just the fact that it can happen elsewhere. Now, I think that I've seen articles over the years where they, we find these building blocks. You can probably go into more detail and more accurate than I can, but we find, studying like meteorites, right, and finding sources of building blocks. And I think that's promising, I think, to some regard. And now maybe you can actually go a little bit about how are we actually locating? Is this something that we're scanning remotely from are we setting probes to meteors and to asteroids and collecting samples, or is it from fossilized pieces that are found in meteorites that are actually located on Earth? How is that actually happening? How are they finding these building blocks?
Yeah, so it's not exactly my area, but from what I know is at the moment, what we do is first we do look at meteorites that fall here on planet Earth, and we look at their chemical composition and their isotopic composition, and we see what's happening with different, for instance, building blocks, which are amino acids. But another thing that we do is that we do spectrophotometry, classical astronomy studies, where we go on the Oort cloud, or we go on other meteorites, and we go into distant areas. And when we get the composition back, eventually, if we clean the data and we look really well at the signals coming back, we can see compositions which are related to amino acids. And from a different point of view, when we see, we had a very famous scientist, in the 1960s doing their own, soup, how do you say it, primordial soup experiments, right? And they sort of, I forgot their name, I don't know, it will pop up later. Very important, very important. They got Nobel Prize for it and everything. But basically what they did is that they found a way to produce these building blocks, which are amino acid, in a way which didn't involve any biological processes whatsoever. So basically, if you have the right conditions, you have some of the atoms, and you have an energy source, eventually during some time, you will get some of these things coming together, the atoms, into amino acids that we are familiar with today. So that's an important thing to see. So one of the theories is that you had all these different amino acids produced in different meteorites, and all these meteorites had a big, not a big time. They had a time where they were bombarding planet Earth. So you would have these building blocks coming into planet Earth, landing in a water planet, and are able to sort of like swim around, move around, and they would have a lot of energy going on, because at the beginning of the planet Earth, we had a lot of volcanic activities, and we had a lot of warmth and a lot of activity going on. So eventually you would have the chemical energy necessary in order for different atomic things to bind. The interesting question is, of course, what is the volume that you need these little tiny molecules to be in order for them to interact with one another? So then you have people talking about the lipid world theory, which comes and say, well, life cannot just, anywhere connect by its own, because it's a big volume. They can just wander around for forever. So the way to make it statistically more logical is to put them in an enclosed area. And that enclosed area would be like a lipid membrane. And what recent research has shown is that these lipid membranes can form by themselves into micelles. So you don't, again, if you have these molecules already, lipids or hydrophobic or very primitive hydrophobic molecule, eventually they will interact in order to repulse the water molecules outside. And then you have a really tiny closed cell, basically, which is empty at the moment. But if some molecules, drift in, they have now small volume, they have the energy, they can interact with one another, and then evolution happens.
Well, that's amazing. We had a question actually come in from the audience, so I'm just going to kind of put this up here on the screen there. So from AC, so what do you think the maximum size of a unicellular organism can reach as like the
magnifica. Oh, wow, that's what a name.
Yes,
a bacterium with an average cell length greater than 9,000 micron that is visible to the naked eye. Wow. So what is the maximum size a unicellular can reach? Like, wow. So I think we haven't seen, the biggest yet. What we do know is that life on planet Earth has millions of different niches. So the possibilities are literally infinite to find these niches. And when you look at the evolution of planet Earth, for instance, and we had like 5 mass extinctions, we're now on the 6th mass extinctions. What you do see is that between these mass extinctions, you get a completely new order, completely new families, and completely new species that didn't exist at all before. So for instance, all of a sudden you had plants. The plants did not exist for a while on planet Earth. And it took just billions and hundreds of millions of years in order to get this form of life, which we now know as plants, and they have so many, formats for it. So coming and saying, what do you think the biggest? I don't think, it can reach almost any size. It's just a matter of what are the conditions and have we found it, and you can find it. Life is a very interesting, complex, complicated, interesting, in-depth system that goes and takes all these different environmental factors and just come up with this beautiful biotic forms. And it's full of imaginations. There's so many things out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting too that you brought up mass extinctions, because it almost seems a little bit dismal when you think about it. But I think that we have to give some credit to our past, that without those mass extinctions, we may not actually be here. Most likely we would not be here, or at least not here yet, or in this form, right? So we kind of have to look back in the past to think, we almost have to not be thankful necessarily for mass extinctions. I hope it sounds like that's sadistic to some degree, but it's what got us here, right?
Yeah, so, and just think about it. Future generations of cockroaches are going to thank us for doing ourselves a mass extinction right now. So like in 250 million years, you're going to have massive cockroaches, controlling the planet, and it's all thanks to us and our, way we treated the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope that it doesn't come to that. Let's hope we come to our senses and actually don't bring on the next mass extinction. Well, of course, there's been a lot of extinctions actually that have already happened in the animal species because of our presence here on Earth already, right? So, which is sad to think about. So, so I wanted to kind of jump into a couple other topics here. So, one of the projects. So, you're actually in a project right now that it's called Me First.
Right.
Which is a project that you're running in the Middle East. So I wonder if you could actually go into some details about that and
Right.
fill us in.
So me and a dear colleague of mine called Reut Sorek, we thought that we need to push forward women in space, not only space industry, but literally in space, especially because of the recent developments that we see in private space in a new space ecosystem. And we are much aware of certain, UN resolutions that say that women should be involved and more in, resolving big issues for my region, for the Middle East region. And we want to have a female astronaut, and we want it to be from the Middle East, which historically did not have a female astronaut, except for an Iranian citizen who flew as a private astronaut many years ago. And what we want to do is that through a regional effort, we want to have this amazing network of a selected group of women, professional women, around 20 years of age and up. And by building these networks between us and by training them perhaps via certain analog missions, perhaps, or other training facilities that are now being built across Europe and also in the US, we want them eventually to be ready to work and live in space. And once we have that, we actually plan on having a ticket and sending one of them, or as much as we can, to space via one of the space launch providers. And the beauty of this program is not about just the launch. It's definitely not just about, putting a figure in space. Is that we are going to make sure that once they come back to their own communities, they're in a leadership position in their communities. There's something completely different. They can affect whole communities, and there are strong powers to bring, whether it's peace and whether it's prosperity, whether it's, people really care about their region right now, and we're having a lot of issues. So this is one program that could do a lot of good in the Middle East, and we're pushing it forward.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that, I think we're even, it's getting better, I think, but, I think women are still, far
away. We're also looking, you look into research about women in space, and it's very dull. There's not enough info there, and we're looking to change that as well.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's amazing that there's so much work that's happening, and really that, you're really taking the, as they say, the bull by the horns, and you're really just going after this and getting it done. Because I mean, that's the thing, is that, you can't just kind of sit back and hope that, that it's going to get better.
No, women take action. Yeah, it's just not going to happen if we sit back. That's what we realized, and that's what we want to do. Yep. And because we know how important it is, so me and Reut separately, we do a lot of education and outreach in science and STEM and all that stuff, and we know how much space is important for the future generation. And I touch the future, I teach. So part of my activities is really to teach people and their families and kids and everything about space. So space is super important to pull communities through. UAE, of course, have 2 astronauts coming up. One already is an astronaut that has been to space, and now they're training their female astronauts. So I hope that within maybe 4 years or even less, she will fly in space and make some experiments and come back home as a first female. She will be actually the first Arab female astronaut. That's going to be amazing.
That's awesome. Another thing too that I wanted to kind of talk about is, as we're seeing, the commercialization of space, and the fact that, we have private astronauts, that are going up into space. I mean, it's interesting when you think about the possibilities and what's happening today. I mean, if I think back in terms of excitement, I know it's kind of before my time as well, but the excitement that like the Apollo era had its way. I actually think that we're feeling that today. The possibilities and what's happening today. And I just wonder what your thoughts are in terms of, like the private missions that are happening, like the AX-1. Of course, we have the Inspiration as well crew. Of course, you're out there with Dr. Proctor in the conference right now, actually, which was on that mission.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts about this whole privatization and everybody else getting, not everybody else, but more people getting the opportunity to go into space?
I think it's amazing. I think it's about time.
Yes.
I think it pushes the envelope for SpaceX and for NASA and for private companies who are launching these people to space and back. I think it will accelerate our advancement in building, for instance, new infrastructure, whether it's a new international space station like Axiom 1 and others, or whether it's even a moon base. It's just going to push everything. And I think it's fantastic the way it's happening. I know there's going to be a lot of issues, whether it's legal issues and insurance issues, and there's going to be, and I think there's still a bit of a problem with the fact that a lot of people don't like sending billionaires to space.
Yes.
There is, even if they are amazing people, there's resentment, and and that is still a point which needs to be resolved. And I think it will be resolved once you see a new class of private astronauts, which are basically company employees. Okay, they're doing their job, whether it's in the International Space Station, whether it's a moon base, whether it's orbiting the Earth, because that is their work, and they're not privileged to go there. They are privileged, of course, because not a lot of people went to work, but they're doing their work. They're helping their company. They're helping humanity. They're doing these things. So you're looking for a new combination of private astronauts that will actually make sense to a lot of people. And I think we're heading in that direction. I think it's awesome. I think everybody's looking to have more diversity in space, more inclusive in space. Cyan Proctor is a big believer in Jedi space, and we heard this term all over the place. And I'm like, and she's absolutely right. We do need to send more diverse people. So it's not going to be just fighter pilots or ex-fighter pilots or billionaires. We need to send more people, different people, to do work, to do art, to do poetry. I was so happy to hear about some of the artistic work that went into the mission, into AX1. I think it's super important to engage these people, and they have such a creative and new ways of looking at how to do things in space. But one of the things that people don't realize is that the current infrastructure that we have in space is really old. It's really tight, and it's problematic. So, for instance, in biological sciences and in pharmaceutical. So you have, like, for instance, you have the Israeli company called Space Pharma, and they have a very nice, technological platform, like a 3U kind of box where you can do a lab on the chip. But even that, it's a bit, it has to fit exactly the voltage, the size, the racks that you have on the ISS. That's a limiting factor. That infrastructure is limiting. So what we're looking forward is not only to have more diverse people going up to space, but also the infrastructure and all the processes behind it, which is a huge amount of processes, right? All the safety regulations and everything. But you want it to be more flexible. You want to see new stuff coming up. And I think this whole issue is pushing it forward. And we're actually going to see big changes coming quite sooner than what people expect. And especially in LEO, especially in low Earth orbit. The moon is still a big puzzle for me, I have to say. I think China is going to get there first. That's what I think at the moment, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's, the race is on, right? I've seen some comments come in that regard. I know the USA kind of, obviously they want to be there first, but it's, I've heard some comments about it's their race to lose. And, but you know what, the thing is that, healthy competition can cause some amazing things to happen. And I'm always a fan of cooperation over competition, but obviously we'll have to see how that all plays out. But
I have to say that in my opinion, if, for instance, so all this issue that NASA now giving funds to private American companies, and that's why you have all these Dragon capsules coming out from SpaceX and everything is happening also with Blue Origin and all the rest of the companies. I think that's a brilliant idea, but it should have happened like 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
If it would have happened 2 decades ago, we've been in a completely different situation today with the moon. So.
Well, it widens the pool of talent. That's the thing, is if you only if you're limiting and locking things down in your own organization only, then of course you're very, to me, you're restricted. Restrictive in terms of what your capabilities are. But when you actually open it up, you have a whole planet now of talent, because private organizations can actually they can hire from anywhere. They can acquire talent from anywhere. And I think it's a very smart move. Yeah, but I agree with you. It's like, should have been a couple decades ago, but you know what? It's happening now, and I think that's the important thing.
And I do believe in the American spirit and in the innovation, in the way our global world is working. So I think things will speed up. They will speed up more than what we think, and I think we're heading in a good direction when it comes to new space. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Now I have a couple questions here I want to kind of ask you that came in as well, in terms of some of the areas that you've actually been involved in. So So right now, so you've been involved in the Israelis' DMars analog project in the
Yes.
Negev, is it Negev Desert?
Negev.
And Negev Desert, okay, sorry. And
No
I just
worries.
wonder if you could tell us a bit about that and how it gets started and who's been all involved in that.
So it started around 2017, and it started as a way for us. So we had a few people, especially a space engineer called Yuval Porat and a geologist PhD student called Reut Sorek, who were familiar with the Austrian Space Forum activities. And this Austrian Space Forum is a European group of people, basically, that every 2 years do an analog mission in a different desert. And they really wanted, these two people called me and called other people and said, look, we want to have an analog mission with these people. Can you help us, organize it? What do you think about it? And so on and so forth. So we had a meeting with the Israeli Space Agency and with the Austrian Space Forum, and they came for a visit. And they were really excited about what they saw. We have an amazing desert. Some parts of it look like Mars. The visuals are stunning. The geography and geomorphology are stunning. And we have high capabilities. Like Israel is very innovative from its technological things, and they were sure that we're going to get a lot of. They were looking forward for experiments from leading Israeli scientists and so on and so forth. But what happened is that during 2018, they realized that they won't be able to do it in 2018, so they said let's push it back to 2020. And after that decision came through, we, being a group of people, we were like, okay, so what are we doing now? And we had me and Dr. Hillel Rubinstein and Reut Sorek. We had a very nice educational program at the Davidson Institute for Science Education at the Weizmann Institute. And we had an educational program which was called the Young Astronaut Academy. I was the astrobiology core lecturer there. And they said, okay, let's do analog mission with the kids. But first, we have to do analog mission by ourselves. We need to understand what this is all about. We don't know anything. We've never built a habitat. We have no idea what is happening. So that was that, and we started doing a lot of meetings, and we got these amazing, space architects and people from special units and people who understand the Negev and, really wanted to do like circular, economical, habitat designs. And we had a few people filming some of the process as well. It got very excited at one point, and eventually we had a habitat. Alon Chika and Moshe Tzagai were the architects at the time, and Alon Chika did the modification later on for Hub 02 for the Amadi 2020 mission that came later on. So the Austrian Space Forum did have an international mission in the Israeli Negev eventually. It happened in 2021 because of the COVID, and I had an experiment there as well, and it went beautifully in the Ramon crater. Beautiful pictures, absolutely fantastic mission for 3 weeks. And in 2018, we were on the ground, me and 5 other analogs astronauts. We had nuclear physicist, we had a physicist, we had a psychologist, we had a musician, and we had an architect, the Shalom Chikal, a space architect, and me. And basically, we learned so many things. It was quite an experience, and we said, okay, we're going to keep this going for a while and see how more missions can come in, how we can improve the technological innovations that are happening within this habitat, within these missions. And we had all these, we had the mission control set up, we had the 20 minutes delay to each direction because of the length. It changed completely our operational way of doing things. We had some experiments to do with desert crust. We had some muon detector that we wanted to check. We had a few things, just how to live life when you're completely isolated. We had a mock-up spacesuits that were just like 15 kilos, but completely changed the way, for instance, how I as a microbiologist have to work outside. I learned a lot from that, and it was a huge outreach project. That's what happened at the end. It became a huge outreach project with lots of visuality, lots of impact on people to understand, hey, we can do more stuff in Israel about space, and not just, whether it's a satellite or astronomy or just research. We can actually do, space simulation with people. And in Israel, we have an amazing diversity of professionals that are really needed within isolated situation in far remote areas like Mars. That's what I understood. And it has been amazing. We had support for that mission in 2019, and later we had support from the Israeli Space Agency, we had support from the ICA Foundation, we had support from Ormat, which is a big company, and they, helped us to build the entire structure to do. And later on, we had other partners as well, and it's been quite a roller coaster for us. And we're now looking at, new direction to see what's happening. It's very hard at the moment to get funding for these type of projects. The platforms are very complex, they're very costly, and you need to be very careful on how you focus your activity on it. And we're still, I think, struggling at that stage, but we did something, we put something on the map.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I can't imagine how exciting that would be. I mean, I've never been able to go out in the field and run experiments. And what I'm really impressed with what's happening today, I kind of think back to when I was a kid, and I won't carbon date myself. But in terms of what's available today for children and for young adults and for high schoolers, I mean, the programs and the information that's available with the work that you're doing. If you look at another amazing lady that's doing work with like Janet Ivey, I mean, it's just incredible what's actually happening out there and what's available to kids to really inspire them, because they are the next generation for all fields of STEM. I mean, whether it's astrobiology, whether it's whatever. I mean, it's amazing of what's actually there to inspire. And of course, you're doing amazing work in inspiring the next generation coming up and to get them excited, right? It's just incredible.
Yeah, thank you. So there's two sides to it. First of all, it's really important to have more women as role models, and we need to be more visible. That's one of the things I had to learn, that I can't stay in the lab and do my stuff. I really need to go out. I need to go to conferences. I need to be on TV. I need to be in radio. I need to be in podcasts. I need to meet the people. I need to meet girls. Girls really need to see role models in order to understand and get the confidence to do what they want to do. It's super important that more women, whether they're space engineers or, I don't know, working satellites or scientists, they need to get out there more. I really need to stress that out. So that's what I understand. That's what I do. And also with the Young Astronaut Academy, what we found out is that it's really good to teach them different space sciences, whether it's planetary sciences, astronomy, astrophysics, the basics in all of them, space medicine, space architecture. There's a really wide field that you can teach them. But once you take them out to the field, it's hands-on experience, and it has much more effect on them to understand not only the knowledge, but what they are capable of. And when you work with teenagers and they have all these issues running around their heads, and it's in a very stormy period in their life, it's really important to take them out and get them a slice of what it could be. And I was very proud that in this program, after about a year and a half of all these, field excursions, short field excursions, and then back to the class, and then back again to field excursions, eventually they did an analog mission by themselves, which is something I haven't heard anywhere else in the world at the moment. Like, nobody gives teenagers a habitat and just, go do it. So they train here in Israel, they train for a year, and then they go in for 3 or 4 days, no adult supervision. They have to learn their roles. We as well as basic medical assistants are maybe 50 meters away, but we're not inside the habitat. And it's absolutely fascinating to see after 1 year of this program how they communicate with one another, how they're responsible, how they carry out their experiments, how they have goodwill. And what's even more is what kind of solutions they find to different problems, right? Because you think, oh, what I'm gonna do with communication and planet Earth and stuff. And my kids, my latest group just came with a game that takes advantage of all this, delay in communication, and they won against MSC. So once you get this fun and game happening in these two opposite sides of a space mission, that's like super, super important, because once you go to Mars, you're not gonna have, constant, feeling together with planet Earth and with mission control. That's not going to happen. It's too far away. And you have so many things happening in the field that you have to take care, and maintenance and catastrophes and science, and you have to report and all these things, and you need to rest. So, and everything is in delay anyhow. So very quickly and this is reported also from other, by the way, space simulations and analog missions, that in certain situations, you don't really care about MSC anymore. You know what your mission is. You're in the field. You're doing the job. Why keep, talking to the nagging guy or girl that's on planet Earth. So these kids came up with this game, and once you have a game, it's a completely different psychology for human beings to be involved in a game. Everybody wants to win. You have an incentive to be online on time. I thought that was brilliant, 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 brilliant. And they also found solutions to other things which adults wouldn't think about it. So it's very interesting.
No, actually, that's amazing when you think about that, because we always talk about how much reliance can Mars or any other planet that we inhabit or that we go to, how much reliance can we really put on Earth? And I think that the reality is that we really shouldn't. I mean, obviously we need some help, or I should, like, I'm going. Hopefully I get to go, but
you'll go, Ron. We'll go together.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm gonna. We'll do a Red Planet Live episode. Let's just say 23. We'll make it really. Let's push the bar. Let's push that needle, and say, we'll do it live from the planet. But I think it's important that you actually be able to, because you're going to be alone, and communication, like you were saying, the delay. I mean, it could be if we're looking at Mars, it could be 5 minutes to 28 minutes in terms of round trip communication, depending on where it is. And I think that's going to really settle in that we're actually on our own, and you have to be able to take care of yourself, and because you don't know, there's no one can just come rescue you. And I think it's amazing actually what's happening, and how much is going into that, because I've actually interviewed some analog astronauts from the MDRS crews, and one thing that they talked about is really the personal relationships, the loneliness, and it's so important that we're actually figuring that stuff out now where we can, in a safe manner on Earth, in habitats, because it's something that's going to be a huge part of it.
Yeah. So it's interesting how you want, what would be the crew composition? What would be the ideal crew composition? And one other thing I realized is that actually, part of the crew does not have to be sensitive at all. There's some type of person that doesn't matter whether they're alone or they're not, whether they're social, whether they're not. They just don't care. They have their mission. They're very calm about it. And that aspect is like, it's almost like if you talk to people sometimes who are on the spectrum, right? And they don't get it, they don't understand your body language, but they do excellent work, right? So it's amazing for me to think what would be the team composition that you need to Mars. And there has been, many studies and many research articles about that. But for me, each analog mission is very interesting to see. I think some of the analog missions, I think MDRS as well, where all of a sudden you have a group of people who not really met before and haven't worked in field situation, in isolated situation. I think that's a bit problematic, especially for long missions duration. I don't think it provides a good analog experience, in my opinion, because what happens is that when you meet for the first time these people and you're now already in a different environment than what you're used to, and you're isolated and you have all these issues, then what you're not stuck, but what you're dealing with is just this, first stage of engaging these people and engaging your work and finding the balance. And that's what your mission is about. But that's not how it's going to be, is it?
No, it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But it's amazing what we can do today in terms of, taking those steps. And I mean, that's the whole idea of an analog mission, right? Is to kind of get some experience before you get some experience, I suppose, right?
Yes, but analog missions, they're changing now that you have new space, right? So analog missions have to change their own, way of doing things, for instance, because if you have people now who are able to pay for a rocket for Blue Origin or for Virgin Galactic and go to space and come back, and especially people who can pay, of course, for going to the ISS, that's amazing. And probably also, by the way, the flying around Earth that SpaceX is planning to do more with the Polaris program by Jared Isaacman. So I'm thinking, what would be the edge for analog missions here on Earth? I really am, thinking about that, because all of a sudden real space is becoming more accessible, right? So you want people here to have a transformative, you want them to have a positive, you want them to come out with a new skill set, and you want them to know it, right? You don't want them, beating around the bush. What happened to me here? What happened to me there? Yes, I went into discussion, became a fight, So you really have, I think, to think about these things in analog missions and make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're making an impact.
Well, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Just a couple more things, because I know we're getting
Mhm.
close to the hour, but I wonder if you could actually touch, because we have so Midburn 2022 is coming up. So I wonder if you could actually maybe, go into that a little bit in terms of what that is and how,
Right.
Camp Martians is going to be like, and yeah, maybe just let you dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love this project. It came up a few months ago, and all of a sudden the stars have aligned perfectly for me for this project. So I'm super happy about it. So Midburn is the Burning Man in Israel. I always wanted to go. I never had the chance. I was never part of the camp. I was never part of, different people going there. I never had the time for it. And this year I decided I wanted to burn something, hopefully a habitat. So I that's the truth. I wanted to burn something about, make something symbolic about, leaving the habitat. Let's burn it and, build a new one. I don't know. I was just playing around. And I talked with a few people and they completely like, this is an amazing idea, but let's not burn anything. And I'm like, what do you mean? I want to burn a habitat. And they said, no. We're going to have a Martian camp. And I told them, okay. And what's, so we're not burning a habitat. So we're not going to build a new habitat. So what is this all about? They go like, yeah, it's your idea. You come up with it. And I said, okay. So we're going to be Martians that came back from Mars after, several decades. And we're meeting our Earth brothers, again. And the question here is, what is the story? So first of all, why are we coming back from Mars? Why are we coming back from the red planet? Did it, burn? Did we finish the plan? We had a plan. It was 50 years. We're coming back. Is it because we used all the resources that we could use? Is it because we completely failed our mission? Is it because we missed Earth? Why are we coming back? So it's actually an open issue, and I'm living it that way. And then comes the issue of, so Mars is a dry planet. It's completely dry. So we are sort of like going to introduce all these different concepts and ceremonies and music and things like that to the Earth, to the water planet, which is Earth. And we're going to try and explain what it meant to live for several decades on Mars. So I'm taking it a bit further, not just saying, okay, we're going to colonize Mars. I'm saying, no, we colonized Mars, but now we're coming back. And Midburn, because of its anarchy and creative energies, it's going to be an amazing place for us to test this and check it out.
I wonder, I'm trying to think in the future now that that's such a cool topic and concept coming up. I wonder if they're going to have analog missions on Mars someday where they're going to try to mirror what Earth looks like to get prepared to come back.
Yeah, and people are going to tell them, what, you didn't mimic the gravity? I mean, no, it's not real. You're not mimicking the gravity. No, it's not real.
Yeah, we don't have any gravity ships yet from the Asgard haven't provided any. So, someday. No, that's amazing. It's such a cool way. It's almost like a flip of perspective.
It is.
Like the point of view completely flips the other way. I think that's actually a cool way of looking at it. Actually, that's amazing. Just a couple more questions, if that's okay. I know we're getting. I don't want to take you too much longer, but I wanted to. Just because you were actually involved in setting up the Israeli zone, the Mars Society chapter in Israel, so I wanted to kind of see. Obviously, it's still active, and you were actually involved in setting that up. How is the interest in Mars at the chapter, and in terms of in Israel in general? Like, how is the interest there?
So it's hard for me to gauge. Where Israel in general is very much interested in the moon, in Earth, in saving planet Earth from space or not. Mars is definitely there. There's a lot of information going around about Mars. There's a lot of activity happening, for instance, with Starship and Elon Musk that helps to propel things. Analog missions, which are happening in Martian environments or semi-Martian environments, do get the attention of the public and ask them to ask the right questions about it. And also the public takes it back to their own perspective. So for instance, we have a lot of Muslims, and we have conservative Muslims and we have conservative Jews. And one of the things that come up is like, how do you pray? To which direction? You wouldn't think about that, would you?
Nope.
So it's interesting. It's very interesting. And we have all sorts of other, like, people are going, insane about technological and innovation and how they can integrate it into habitats or into other, circular economy, circular resources, whether it's water, because we're really good at water innovation and so on and so forth. But we're still looking for the other piece. So, well, inside Israel, we are very much interested in technology that can go to space. We're still, that other part which connects those technologies into the space industry, that is still a bit fragile. So we have several, space startups in Israel, which are doing very well at the moment. But it's obviously that there's much more that can go into the space sector. So things are catching up from that perspective as well. But it's still, I think also from the private market, I have to say, from new space, it's because everybody has their own plan of, the next space station or the next mission. And so you can't just come and say, okay, I have this amazing service or this amazing technological product and it solves everything, because then people are starting to ask, okay, where does it fit the International Space Station? Does it fit the new design of another commercial station? Does it fit, the lunar gateway? What does it fit? Where does it go? And then people are coming back to saying, no, it's dual usage. We can do this and put it in deserts. It's going to work in Antarctica. It's going to work here. And it's a bit messy. It's a bit messy at the moment. And then once it's messy, it's not necessarily economical, or it might be economical, but then it takes a longer time to get to a market and to be ripe for, for actually having a commercial product that fits exactly to its market. And so it's an interesting time to be. And General Israel is interested in Mars, but we are not building anything like officially for Mars. We're not the UAE, which has a very, well-designed plan. They want to build a city. They're sending astronauts. They're putting their money. We have nothing like that at the moment.
Well, I kind of look at that a little bit deeper now. What are your thoughts on in terms of, is there anything in the works in terms of, cooperation with your neighbors, the neighboring countries around Israel? So is there anything that's actually happening there that you can think of in terms of projects that might actually be, happening between Israel and other nations that actually maybe border you?
So the countries that border us are Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, and, Egypt. As far as I know, with the bordering countries, we do not have any space programs happening. We might have, again, through Me First, we might have the first, science educational program happening, and that would be brilliant and amazing. But other than that, I'm not aware. We do have scientific cooperation with mostly with Jordan and a few parts of the Palestinian Authority, but not a lot. Nothing's happening with Syria and Lebanon and Egypt, as far as I know. But we do have quite a lot of scientific cooperation going on because we're all interested in solving water problems. So that's super important for us, and we're doing really great strides in that area, and I'm very happy for the scientific community to come together and talk about it. I don't think we had a lot of COVID-19 cooperation, but that was actually could have been a good motivator for regional cooperation as well. And I do know that we have some partnerships coming up with the UAE.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing because they're making huge strides, and definitely, it's amazing. Well, actually, there's a lot of people making huge strides. A lot of nations are making, even Canada. I think we're doing well with some cooperation, and you and our part, taking perseverance and ingenuity. They had a little bit of part of getting that up there as well. So I think that there's a lot of potential out there. So one thing I just kind of want to touch on, obviously we're getting close to the hour. I don't want to take you too much longer. I'm sure you're excited to get back to talk to and socialize with the other members of the conference. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of touch on anything that you might want to promote, anything that's coming up in the future for yourself and your organizations, any books, papers, anything like that. So I kind of want to open the floor to you and just kind of let you take it away and talk about some things that maybe that interest you.
Okay, so first of all, if you want to do a space simulation mission, please contact your local analog mission provider. There are a few in the US, thank goodness. There's also now quite several in the in EU, so go for it. And there's one in Israel, so feel free to contact us and see what it's all about. We're very happy to get new people. And the second thing is that I highly recommend this book. My favorite. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Everybody screenshot that.
It's very important. If you can, come and visit Biosphere too. It has a lot of lessons to teach us about ourselves and how we do things. The scale here is mind-boggling, by the way. It's an analog mission like I've never seen before. I never understood what exactly they were doing here until I saw the scale of things, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah. It cost them at the time $250 million to build it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and in terms of today, it's more than $1 billion to build an analog facility. That's
prices have gone up.
Wow.
Everywhere for everything. Wow.
Yes. And if you're interested in promoting Middle Eastern, female astronaut, please contact me, and I'll be happy to chat about it as well.
Yeah. So what we'll do is maybe at the end of the chat, we'll if there's an email address or a website. You also have your own website as well, I believe.
No. I'm actually going through LinkedIn these days. I'm happy with LinkedIn.
Just LinkedIn? Okay.
Just LinkedIn.
So,
I have Facebook, but I'll answer anywhere you want. But LinkedIn and Facebook, that's my main.
Okay. So please look up Reut on LinkedIn, and of course, in Facebook, and of course, you can follow her posts there as well. So, I think that's it for us. A lot of questions came in. I want to thank you, especially for spending some time with myself and the audience, and kind of going over all these amazing topics and helping us actually learn more about what you do in astrobiology, and of course, analog missions and amazing all this that's going on. I want to thank the audience. Of course, without you, we don't have anyone to talk to. So thank you for tuning in and joining in and supporting the show. And this has been amazing. And obviously, I want to thank the Mars Society for the opportunity to host the show and to be an amazing patrons, and of course helping out with that. That's amazing. And so this is Red Planet Live, episode 10 with Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich, and I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank you, Reut, for spending time with me today again. And thank you, everybody, and we will bid you adieu. And thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ron. Have a beautiful day, and come and visit Biosphere too. You'll love it.
I do hope to get there, and we'll let you get back to having more fun.
Thank you very
have
much.
A safe flight home.
Thank you. I will. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody, by the way. Happy Mother's Day. Thank you for joining in on this amazing event. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.